Hi, this is David with the Discount Dragon again, and we are back to our mold making endeavors. Today, we have progressed to the state where we've got all of the little indentations we need around the edge of the first piece of the mold. Made those with marbles and beads. And then we've taken the back and we've added extra material so this is a little bit firm. You don't want it too floppy because then it's just going to deteriorate any quickly. Now, we need to build the other piece of the mold on top of this piece of the mold. The problem is that if you start putting silicone mold putty up against silicone mold putty, it sticks and it's never going to come loose. It becomes one solid piece. So you need some sort of material in between to keep them separated. And in this case, what I'm going to be using is graphite. And it goes on very easily. Just take a brush and kind of paint it in there. Just make sure you get an even coating. Get the excess off. And I just used this. I think I got it at someplace like Ace Hardware. It's super cheap and it lasts you forever. So you'll take this and you'll paint the flange with the graphite. And you're going to want to put a newspaper or something down because this stuff, it's pretty messy. There's kind of no getting around it. In theory, I should probably be wearing a dust mask, but I'm not really that fussy about such things. And if it was something that was really hazardous, I would wear a dust mask. But in this case, I'm just skipping it. So we're just going all the way around, painting the flange with the graphite to get a nice black color on there. And the reason that graphite works well to provide mold release for silicone is because the graphite puts a layer of particles there. And essentially the silicone will try to adhere to the graphite instead of the other material. Now, things like oils and other materials, I think there are other alternates for mold releases for silicone mold putties and silicones in general, but I'm really not that familiar with them, and a lot of the ones that work on other sorts of molds don't work on silicone. So I hit graphite, it worked really well, and I use it most of the time. If I was going to be doing something like chocolate or a food-safe material, or something that you couldn't afford to get a little bit of dark coloring on, I would have to look into a different mold release. As you can see, this goes pretty quick. And then just kind of tap it a bit to get the excess off. So this is what we've got. And the next step, oh, actually I've got a few little yellow patches hiding in there. Because anything yellow, the mold putty is going to try to stick to. Okay, pretty good. Tapping it to get the excess off. Now in this one, we are going to need to use this guy, our little handy piece of supermarket grocery bag, or produce bag. Otherwise it's going to be difficult to get everything to come together here. So we will take some lumps of mold putty and knead them together. And we're going to start building up the next part of the mold. So this spot on the top is where we're going to connect the sprue. The sprue is going to be this thing, which is basically a funnel built into the mold to pour the casting material into. This mold is being designed as a mold to pour liquid material into. Examples of that would be things like plaster or resin. Those are very common ways to go. Now, one of the reasons that you're going to be using the plastic instead of doing this by hand is if you start handling it yourself, you're going to start rubbing off the powdered graphite, and then stuff will stick together and it'll just be a mess. But with this, you avoid that largely. And you can still also get your nice feathered edges, which you still need in order to make everything work properly. So we're working up onto the flange, and then we're working onto the piece of art itself. And you see we've worked down into the indentations. And you'll be doing this all the way around, leaving this area here empty so that later you can attach this. So let's take another piece and knead it on up. We're not going to do the whole thing, we're just doing a little bit as a demonstration. Then we'll finish it up to the next stage and come back with the next episode. But I want to do it at least a little bit so you get the idea. So we've got our initial piece of mold putty in there with nice feathered edges, partly on the piece and partly on the wall. And then we're going to come in with our next piece. And you notice the little key there. We're going to be working it down into the key, which provides alignment for the two pieces of the mold. Because if you don't have the two pieces of the mold in alignment with each other, it's not going to produce a piece that is going to look like the original. You need them both to line up pretty good. You are still going to get a mold line, which you can eliminate by work afterwards. You can also try to plan around mold lines, but ultimately you usually can't avoid them entirely. In some circumstances there are techniques you can use to avoid them, but I wouldn't count on it. Figure you're going to have to either work them out at the end or place them in places on the finished piece where a mold line wouldn't be objectionable. Oh, rubbed a little bit there. Just put the black back in there. Good. So there you have it. You just keep doing that all the way around and cover up this piece as well to create the second piece of the mold, leaving this spot open. Then, once that's done, what I'll do is I'll stick this here, attach it with more mold putty, and then what we'll have is we'll have a shell that we can pour material in from up here. Additionally, we're going to be adding a hard shell around the mold putty shell. So you've got two pieces of the mold putty with the part attached here. Then we add something like this, which we've done on our other mold. This was the skull fragment mold we were working on. This rubber piece here is the mold putty. This is the original. And then this is a hard outer shell for the mold putty to rest against. And once this is cured a bit more, we're going to pull this apart, take out the original, and then we can press mold Fimo down into that cavity, or we could take something like a plaster and slosh it down in there to create a piece, which we'll be doing later on as well. So, create the second piece of the mold, attach the holder for the sprue, and then create the hard outer shell, and then it'll all be held together with rubber bands or twine or something like that. So that is where we are in this stage. And I will give you one more quick side tip before we go. In addition to making molds like this, the silicone mold putties can be used to make other objects. And you can do that, just by forming them and putting them into molds with mold release and so forth. But something you may not be aware of is that the mold putty can be colored. Here I've got a piece of yellow mold putty and a piece of white mold putty, but they're completely black. In this instance, I took the graphite and I just kept on kneading it into the mold putty until you got a uniform color. And the graphite does not inhibit the curing of the mold putty, so you can have black mold putty for various craft uses. You can use it as a different coloring for a different piece of the mold, or to mark something on a mold, or, as I said, to create a flexible rubbery piece for an ornament or a button or, you know, just whatever. So you need the two pieces together. Obviously, since it's all black, you're not going to be able to see when the two materials have assumed a uniform color, because there is no uniform color. It's all the same color to start with. But through experience, you can kind of figure out about how long it'll take to knead them together. So we've got that. That will cure into a little black rubbery ball. But if we were sitting here with a mold, we could make it into like a little skull and press it into there, or what have you, a little evil doll face or whatever you feel like. So we reviewed this, we've gone over the hard shell a little bit, and talked about coloring the mold putty itself with powdered coloring agents. And I guess that's it for this time, and see you next time.